Determined Tin Soldier. Hello, children, we are starting to tell bedtime stories again. This story is about, there is a special tin soldier, a toy soldier made of melted tin. Guess what wonderful adventures this little tin soldier will encounter? Let's listen to the story together. Once upon a time, there were 25 tin soldiers. They were all brothers, because they were all cast from an old tin spoon. They carried Mauser rifles on their shoulders and looked straight ahead. Their uniforms were half red and half blue, very beautiful. They stayed in a box. One day, the lid of the box was opened, and they heard the first words in the world. "Ah, it's a tin soldier." This sentence was shouted by a child, and he clapped his hands. Today is his birthday, and these tin soldiers are a gift he got. He now put these tin soldiers on the table. Each soldier was exactly alike, except for one slight difference. A piece of his leg was missing, for he was the last to be cast, and there was not enough tin. But he could still stand firmly, just like the others, and he was the one who attracted the most attention. On the table where they stood there were many other toys, but the most eye-catching thing was a beautiful palace made of paper. Through the small windows one could see the hall inside. In front of the hall, there were some small trees standing around a small mirror. The mirror represented a lake. Some little swans made of wax swam about the lake, their shadows were reflected in the water. All this was beautiful, but the most beautiful thing was a lady who stood at the open door of the palace. She was also cut out of paper, but she wore a beautiful cloth dress. A small blue ribbon fluttered from her shoulders, which looked like a turban, and in the middle of the ribbon was a shiny ornament. It was almost as big as her whole face. The lady stretched out her hands. For she was a dancing artist. One of her legs was raised so high that the tin soldier could hardly see it, so he thought that the young lady had only one leg, just like himself. "She could be my wife," thought the one-legged tin soldier, "but she's too fancy. She lives in a palace, and I have only a box, and there are 25 of us squeezed together. I'm afraid she won't be used to it. But I might as well get to know her." So he lay down on his back, behind a snuff bottle on the table. From this angle, he could see the beautiful young lady. She was standing on one leg all the time, without losing her balance at all. When night fell, the other tin soldiers went into their boxes, and the family went to bed. The dolls then became active, visiting each other, making wars, or holding ball parties. The tin soldiers also quarreled in their boxes, because they wanted to come out and join in, but they couldn't open the lids. The nutcrackers did somersaults, and the slate pencils jumped and screamed on the slate. This was like the coming of a demon king, and it woke up the golden bird. She also started to talk, and her words were poems. At this time only two people did not move from their original positions. One was the tin soldier, and the other was the little dancer. She stood on her toes straight, with her arms outstretched. The tin soldier also stood steadily on one leg, and his eyes never left her. Suddenly the clock struck 12, and then, bang! The lid of the snuff bottle was opened. But there was no snuff inside, but a small black goblin. The snuff bottle turned out to be a disguise. "Tin soldier," said the goblin, "please keep your eyes open." But the tin soldier pretended not to hear. "Well, you'll see tomorrow," said the goblin. The next morning, the children all got up. They moved the tin soldier to the windowsill. I don't know if it was the goblin who was playing tricks or a gust of cold wind. The window suddenly opened. The tin soldier fell headfirst from the 3rd floor to the ground. The fall was horrible. His legs were straight up, and he stood upside down in his helmet. His bayonet was stuck in the cracks of the paving stones in the street. The nurse and the child came downstairs to look for him. Although they almost stepped on him, they still could not find him. If the tin soldier had shouted, "Here I am," they would have seen him. But he felt that it was not polite to shout loudly, since he was in uniform. Now it began to rain, and the raindrops became heavier and heavier, and finally it was a downpour. When the rain stopped, two wild children passed by. "Look," said one of the children, "there is a tin soldier lying here. Let's take him sailing." They folded a boat out of a piece of newspaper and put the tin soldier in it. The tin soldier floated down the ditch. The two children ran after him on the shore and clapped their hands. Oh my! What a big wave was raised in the ditch! What a torrent it was! It was different after a heavy rain. The paper boat was pitching up and down, and sometimes it was spinning so fast that the tin soldier felt dizzy. But he stood firm, his face did not change, his musket on his shoulder, and his eyes looking forward. Suddenly the boat flowed into a long and wide sewer. It was pitch dark all around, as if he had returned to his box. "I'll see where it will flow to," he thought. Yes, it's the goblin who is causing trouble. If the lady is in the boat, I don't care if it's twice as dark. Then a big rat who lived in the sewer came. "Do you have a pass?" the rat asked. "Take out your pass." But the tin soldier did not answer a word, but held the musket in his hand more tightly. The boat continued to move forward quickly, and the rat followed behind. "Oh! Look at him, with his teeth and claws," and he shouted at the hay and wood fragments. "Catch him! Catch him! He didn't leave the toll. He didn't give up his pass." But the torrent was very strong. At the end of the sewer, the tin soldier could already see the sun in front of him. But he heard a loud noise again, a noise that would scare a brave man. Just think, at the end of the sewer, the water rushed into a wide canal. This was very dangerous for him, just like we are swept down by a huge waterfall. Now he was in the canal, and there was no way to stop him. The boat was rushing out. The poor tin soldier could only hold his body as straight as possible. No one could say that he had ever blinked. The boat turned 3 or 4 times, and the water in it was up to the side of the boat, and the boat was sinking. The upright tin soldier was immersed in the water, with only his head sticking out of the water. The boat was sinking slowly, and the paper was slowly loosening. The water had now reached the soldier's head. He could not help thinking of the beautiful, petite dancer, whom he would never see again. At this moment, the tin soldier heard these words, "Go, go, you soldier, your only way out is death." Now the paper boat had broken, and the tin soldier sank to the bottom of the water, but at this moment, a big fish suddenly swallowed him up. Oh, how dark it was in there! It was worse than in the sewer, and the space was so narrow. But the tin soldier was firm. Even when he lay straight, he still held his Mauser tightly. The fish rushed around and made many terrible movements. Then it suddenly became quiet. Then a light like lightning shot into its body. The sun was shining brightly, and someone shouted loudly, "Tin soldier!" It turned out that the fish had been caught, sent to the market to be sold, brought into the kitchen, and the maid cut it open with a big knife. She took the tin soldier by the waist with 2 fingers and brought him to the living room. Here, everyone wanted to see this remarkable man who had traveled in the belly of a fish. But the tin soldier did not show any pride. They put him on the table. Oh! There are so many incredible things in the world. The tin soldier found himself in his old room again. He saw the old children, the old toys on the table, the beautiful palace and the lovely, petite dancer. She still stood on one leg, and her other leg was still high in the air. She was just as firm. Her spirit touched the tin soldier so much that he almost shed tin tears, but he could not do so. He looked at the dancer, and the dancer looked at the tin soldier, but they did not say a word. At this moment, a little child picked up the tin soldier and threw him into the fire. He did not give any reason, but it was certainly the little goblin in the snuff bottle who was causing all this trouble. The tin soldier stood there, all lit up, and felt a terrible heat in his body. But whether this heat came from the fire or from his love, he had no idea. All his brilliance was gone now. Whether it was lost during his journey or the result of his sorrow, no one could tell. He looked at the little girl, and the girl looked at him. He felt his body slowly melting, but he still held his gun and stood firm. At this moment, the door suddenly opened, and a gust of wind rushed in, blowing the lady away. She flew to the stove, flew to the side of the tin soldier, turned into flames, and disappeared immediately. The tin soldier had now turned into a piece of tin. The next day, when the maid poured out the ashes, she found that the tin soldier had become a small tin heart. But all that was left of the dancer was the shiny ornament, but it was now burned like a piece of black charcoal. Okay, kids, this is the end of the story. I hope you can be like the tin soldier, always stick to your beliefs and face every challenge in life bravely. Have a sweet dream tonight, and wake up tomorrow morning full of strength. Good night.